My name's Jill Rowe, and in this episode, Steve Chalke and I talk about the life lessons we can pick up from learning to swim. We unpack the daring involved in making bold statements and big moves, and how such daring also shows up in the small things too. We think about the wonder of courage and also its cost, reflecting on how it always moves us and the story forward. We consider how failure is the friend of courage, not its enemy, and how such courage breathes life into us and our relationships, as well as our sense of life purpose. This one was fun. We hope you like it. Hey, Steve, us again.
It is.
I think, what number was this? 13?
I don't know, Jill, but I just enjoy them all. It's great being with you. Honestly, it is. Because I should say, why do I say that? Because we worked together for donkey's years.
It's a very long time.
Yeah, but you don't, often just don't get a chance to talk to each other, spend time, because life's busy and all the rest of it. I kind of wave at you more than I talk to you half the time, which I always feel is my loss.
Well,
so
that's
this is
very
great.
kind.
Yeah.
I know it is good. It is good to have this time. Quality time. I don't know how old you were when you learnt to swim, Steve, but I was about 4. I was a bit of a keno when it came to swimming.
I'm sure when I learnt to swim was later than that. Cool, well done.
Yeah, I nearly had Olympic trials. No, I didn't.
I thought you were going to say I nearly drowned.
No. But I remember really, I remember where I was, and I remember the feeling of being scared that I was going to drown. I remember that feeling.
Where was this? In a swimming pool?
It was in the sea.
Wow.
Yes, it was in the sea, and it was with my mum was there, and I remember the feeling, when the water's all around you and you're like, oh no, this is going to be awful and I'm going to drown, or whatever you thought was going to happen to you when you were little.
Did you have armbands or a rubber ring or?
Probably had one armband at that point, because you've got to encourage people to swim, so you start taking the floats off. But I just remember Mum saying, just put a foot down on the floor, because you're not that deep and the floor is there.
Yeah.
I always remember the feeling, because you feel it inside when you're learning to swim as well, don't you? Because there's like this fear and courage thing going on. Like, I want to do this, but this is really scary. And then just put that foot down. You'll be able to find the solid ground. And I've always been interested in how courage, and Brené Brown's like the pope of all this stuff, isn't she? Vulnerability and courage, the relationship, they're the same thing. But I've always admired, particularly in you, you have a very dynamic relationship with risk and you're very courageous. Lots of people would talk about you as very, very courageous. You're a brave man. Courage always takes us further forward, doesn't it? It always helps us to grow and expand and achieve more. But I'm very conscious, Steve, of a massive, courageous step that you took. I can't even remember how many years ago it is now, about LGBT inclusion. That was a leap. That
was a leap. Well, I wished it had been a leap. In the end, I had to bring so many people with me. I didn't quite leap as early as I chose to tell you the truth. So, how did that happen? Well, first of all, I don't feel a brave person, or a courageous, but honestly don't. But I do think this is when you're guided by a vision, going back to what we said in an earlier episode, when you start with your why, it's easier to work out what to do than if you start with the what's and you get scared, So that came about for 2 reasons, really. One was I was leading a church in London, and there were lots of wonderful gay people who were part of the church. Yeah. Honestly, just like my mates, truly, you don't look at people and say, they're gay, they're heterosexual, do you? Yeah, I never look at. I never look at you and go, "Whoa, there's Jill, that great heterosexual." You're just Jill, do you see? So these are just my mates, And of course, the church that I was leading was Oasis Waterloo. Was always I think, it always was inclusive of everyone. It just was from the start. But of course, we didn't tell anyone that. Well, it wasn't that we were scared to tell anyone. It was like everybody you needed to know knew. And then I kind of became aware that someone had to stand up and say this more loudly, because someone had to get this conversation going. And then at the same time, Oasis was developing schools. And so there are lots of young people in our care. And I realised that, amongst them, people vary on, don't they, what the percentages are. But I realised that as our schools grew with first hundreds of young people, then thousands of young people.
And staff.
And parents, there'd be lots of people within our care, and we're a Christ-centred organisation, who, as the battle raged with some elements of the church declaring that, if you're gay, you're doomed, and all that kind of thing, I didn't want anyone to feel that. But I knew that because we were a Christ-centred organisation, unless we said otherwise, they might assume that. And then the government, I knew, was preparing to do some legislation around same-sex marriages, and there was no timetable for that, but I knew that they were preparing, and I realised this would become a national debate, and I realised that everybody would assume that we were against same-sex marriages, and therefore not very LGBT welcoming unless we said it real clear.
Yeah.
And I also realised that for every young person in our schools that might be questioning their sexuality one way or the other, if I could make a loud noise, I could provide air cover for them so they could cradle under that care and say, but I'm part of a school where I'm celebrated. So I wanted to create an umbrella of care, air cover, that for people to shelter under when I knew this storm about same-sex marriage would come, which it did in the end. And people said, if people of the same sex are allowed to get married, the universe will melt down, and all kind of like, bonkers in my view, right? So what I did was I decided to write an article about I'll tell you what happened first, actually. For years and years I thought about this, and I thought I'll publish a book about this. But then I thought, if I publish a book, I'm responsible for the whole of Oasis, and then people will stop funding us. And if they stop funding us, might have to make people like you redundant because there's no money for it. So I can't publish a book in my name. And then I thought, I'll publish a book in someone else's name. C.S. Lewis once did that about a book called The Grief Observed. And then I realised that was bonkers, because unless I stood up and said it, it would have no meaning and purpose. It's just a name that nobody had heard of. And then I said to our trustees of Oasis, I'm going to write a book about this, and I'll publish it after my death.
Yeah.
And then even as I said it to them, I realised that was just sheer cowardice, courage. And it wouldn't do any good, because I'd be dead and unable to defend any of this, and Oasis would get stuck with it. So I decided that I wouldn't write a book because it would take too long. I'd just write a big article, which I did, and I'd explode it in the most evangelical Christian magazine I could think of, which was called Christianity Magazine. So I wrote this article and I showed it to our trustees, and they kind of like, you can't publish that. I'm not blaming them, because they were worried about your job and everybody else's job and all their responsibilities. So we talked it through for over a year, because we got more than one board of trustees, before I finally got permission that, I could do this and it wouldn't completely wipe Oasis off the face of the planet. And then I had to get Christianity Magazine to allow me to publish it. And that was really hard. And they took it to a board meeting as well. And then they said I could publish it as long as I didn't ever write for them anymore. Because they were scared of losing subscribers. Anyway, eventually it was published, and under the title The Last Taboo. Of course, it's not the last taboo at all. It's just an important...
There's always another taboo,
it's just an important thing to debate. And if God is love, God's on the side of everyone and includes everyone. Yeah. An Oasis badge is actually, our circle, our badge is what we call our circle of inclusion. So that's how it happened. But sure enough, I got fired from things. I got banned. Events that asked me to speak uninvited me.
You had an empty diary,
was
didn't you?
completely empty. Completely empty. It was rather wonderful, actually.
Yeah,
That.
had a breather. I know you say that you don't perceive yourself as full of courage and all the rest of it, but maybe courage is just the practice of the thing that we're doing at the time. But there was a huge cost on you of that, and that is part of courage, isn't it?
Yeah.
That courage is not the easy option.
No.
Courage has built in with it risk.
Yeah. Well, it's true to say, I think that was in 2000 and...
It just seems ages ago to me.
12 or something like that. I can't quite remember. Anyway, the point is that every single day, perhaps not every single day, there might have been a few gaps. Since then, including today, people just rip into me the whole time about it. So today it's happened. It happens every day. But, you know, what I always think about that, Jill, is this. I have friends who I love. I mean, I genuinely love them, who are gay. And I think that any hostility shown to me that I have to go through because of this is nothing. It's infinitesimal in comparison with somebody feeling that because of who they are somehow suboptimally human, which is what is often taught, and that is vile, isn't it? So I think in the end you just got, for me it's not about courage, it's just about, I don't want to live a lie. I want to be able to say what I really think. I need to say it because that's the only authentic way to be. And there is loads of risk built into it, and it is scary.
Yeah, and I think that's just true, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is scary.
But I was going to say to you, actually, so I met, how many years ago did we meet? 20?
It was in 94.
Yeah, that's a long time
It's
ago.
a very long time ago.
Right.
I don't know what the sums are.
No, nor do I.
It's nearly 30
bad at
years.
maths.
It's nearly 30 years.
Yeah, anyway, I remember meeting you in Derby one evening and then talking with you.
And you came into the school.
Yeah, and I came into the school where you an RE teacher.
I was.
Yeah, and we got to know each other a bit. And I don't know how many days it was that before. I said to you, hey, Jill, why don't you leave your job, leave Derby, leave your job, your well-paid job, your secure job as head of RE in this school, secondary school, and why don't you come to London and work with me, except there's only one caveat to that. I haven't got any money and can't pay you. So I'd like you to leave your home, leave your job, and come and work with me. And if it all goes well, we might reach the place where somebody will give us some money. If not, bad luck.
It's a great offer. Best offer I'd had.
Well, you did it.
No, I know.
Well,
and
that is courage, like beyond belief.
Courage,
stupidity. Like taken in.
No, it was.
So why did you do that?
So it's interesting you said when you know your why, the difference that makes. And I do think that that's the engine that sits behind courage for me in that decision. So for me, I just had this sense that there's kind of a purpose to my existence, which is, you know, to spend myself in this kind of work that we do in Oasis and to help others to do the same kind of work. That's just always been my thing. And so when you asked me, and I think it was about the second day.
Oh, was it? I left it a long time then.
Yeah, you were very kind. I remember thinking, well, why not? Just try it. And a number of people said I was foolish. I remember coming for the interview and someone on the panel, whose name is Charlotte, kept saying in the interview, so we're all sat together, and she kept saying, are you sure?
Yeah, you see.
Are you sure?
Because I haven't pointed that out. I said, give up your job and come and work with me, and there's no money. And then said, but you'll have to be interviewed, because I realised the other people in Oasis then would need to interview you. But we were interviewing you for a non-existent job with no money.
Which was amazing, right? But I think that because I had this kind of sense of, well, this is what I want to spend my life on. Here's my story. Here's this family, this movement, this organisation where I can bring my story into this story, and it all makes sense. And even though it was scary, and it was scary because we didn't know about the money and we didn't know what would happen, and I had a mortgage, and I was
There
and
you go,
all
you
of
just made it worse.
all of those things. Even though all of that was true, there's just that thing of, well, if I don't do this, then I can really clearly see really easily how simply mapped out my life would have been. I'd have become the deputy head, and I'd have, do you know, it, and then you're like, but is that it? Do you know, is that all there is? And so I think what courage does, when you're just like, I've just got to, let's just throw it in. Let's see what happens. See what happens. And if it all goes wrong, well, you're still a teacher.
You can get another job.
you're still a human being.
There's a shortage of teachers, as
exactly.
we both well know.
But it was, best move I ever made.
Yeah. It was amazing, and look what's happened since.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that your role in Oasis has made Oasis what it is, and underpins Oasis, our ethos, our 9 habits, who we are, which is your work. It's just amazing.
You're very kind.
But courage isn't just big things. I mean, it's like a giant thing. And I just imagine some people would go, yikes, I can't do that. So courage isn't just those big things, is it?
No, I think just being honest with someone takes courage. Because one of the things I often notice is the dance around truth that people have, where they don't say what they're really thinking because they're afraid. They don't say what they mean because they're nervous of the other person falling out with them, etc. And so even on the smallest detail of speaking honestly to another person, I think is an act of courage. Telling someone you love them is an act of courage, isn't it? Reaching out in friendship to someone is an act of courage.
Yeah, it's the little things as well as the big things, the way of living. You know, C.S. Lewis, mentioned him earlier, in one of his books, I can't remember which one it is, this great illustration around this. He tells a story of 2 men, and he says, one man, the first man, saw a building on fire, and he saw a ladder beside the building, and he saw on the 4th floor a woman and her child, the woman screaming, holding her child. So he put the ladder up against the burning building, and he climbed the ladder right to the top, and then he reached inside and he lifted out the child, and he brought the child down, and he rushed back up the ladder, and he lifted the woman out, and he carried her down the ladder, and he rescued both. And a crowd who'd gathered all stood and applauded. Fantastic, what a hero. And then he tells the story about another man who was walking down a road one day, and he saw a cat stuck in a little apple tree just about 8 feet off the ground. And the cat was obviously scared and meowing and very distressed. And there were some branches that he worked out that he could climb up just a few feet off the ground, 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and lift that cat out of the tree to safety, which he did. And there was no one there. And then C.S. Lewis says, so which man showed courage? And then he gave some more facts. He said, the guy who climbed the ladder was a fireman. And in his free time, he loved mountain climbing. He loved heights. The guy who rescued the cat out of the tree had an inbuilt fear of heights, and it was agony for him just to look down a set of stairs from the 1st floor to the ground floor. And then he asked again, which man showed courage? So it's not for us, is it, to judge that she's courageous and he's not, or vice versa. It's for us to take those little steps for ourselves. And sometimes real courage for us is just like turning up
Yeah.
and being there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. How do you think you can grow courage?
I'd say for me, I don't know what you'd say, Jill, but the more steps of courage you take, the easier it is to take steps of courage. The more you venture out from your security and learn how to do it and learn that even failure doesn't matter, the easier it becomes the next time round. I think that failure is a very important part of taking steps of courage. So, you know, I look back over my life thus far, and there's, you know, everybody remembers the steps of courage I've taken that have paid off.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, because I had the courage to step out and start some schools, or I'd start this or begin that or whatever. But, well, you've known me long enough to know there's loads of things that I've pushed that just flopped, you know, just fallen apart completely. There's a big project I'm working on at the moment. I'm talking about big projects again, which, if it comes off, will be extraordinary. And if it doesn't, everyone I know, well, I fear, we're just going, oh, stupid idea he had. You know, so you live with that fear.
Yeah.
So courage always requires courage. It never gets easy. There's always, as you say, fear that's built in. There's always risk. There's always vulnerability.
Yeah.
But actually, the more steps of courage you take, the easier it is to take another step.
So does your level of fear get less, or is it always there, lurking in the background?
It's always there lurking in the background. I think, I don't know about you, as you get older, you're not as old as me, you're a young slip of a thing. But the older you get, I think, the more you realise you've got to live authentically. Your life isn't about you, it's about what you leave, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
the
about what you
legacy
pass
piece,
on to the next generation. So I realised that the more I can, in my small way, add to and help achieve, the easier I make it for those who come beyond me and behind me. So there's a sense in which I don't mean this in an individualistic way, so I don't like saying I, but the further I get, using the, you know, or the further we get, the easier, well, the further we get, then the next generation stands on our shoulders and they start at our ending place. Does that make sense? So it's, let's go for it and let's try and achieve this stuff, because that becomes the beginning place for the next generation, and that means that they will get further and do things that I can't even dream of. We're all just playing our part. We're part of one big movement. It's called the human race.
Yeah. There is something for me, and I think about, you know, me leaving teaching career to come and work for no salary, which I, just so people know, I do now get a salary.
Yes, since last month we started.
26 years, and eventually, no, I'm joking. So Steve, when I'm in your orbit, I'm very conscious of how alive you are, how curious you are, how there's kind of this energy, and I know that in my view, that is connected to courage, because I think when we approach life with courage, even if it's like the smallest amount of courage that we can muster, what it does is it breathes life into us. It expands our perception of what's possible. But also I think it changes the way we relate to other people, because I think it makes us more gracious. I think it makes us more encouraging. I think it makes us more interested in other people. And that to me is just like, even if it's the smallest seed of courage that you can muster, then that's got to be worth it, hasn't it? Because it's bringing life to yourself, and it then brings life to others.
Which is, again, related to your why. Why am I here?
Yeah.
You know, what's my purpose? I'll tell you a funny story and then return to this, because I've got a friend called Tony who studied under Albert Einstein. In fact, I spoke to Tony just last night.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. He lives in the States and he's a professor of sociology. You know him, all the rest of it. He's retired, very elderly now. Yeah. So he lives in a nursing home now, and I often talk to him. Anyway, so the thing is, he told me this story because he studied under Einstein and then he kept friends with Einstein. And one day, he said, when Einstein was older, Einstein's on this train, and the ticket collector's coming down the carriage, and he starts fumbling around for his ticket because he can't find it. So he's fumbling in all his pockets, he's standing up, looking in his bag. Ticket collector gets to him and says, "Dr. Einstein, I know who you are. You don't need to show me your ticket." And on the collector goes. Ticket collector reaches one end of the train and then he's coming back up, collecting new tickets. And as he reaches Einstein's carriage again, Einstein is still fumbling in his trousers and in his bag, and he's emptied it out. And the ticket collector gets to him and says, "Dr. Einstein, I know who you are. I don't need to see your ticket." And Einstein says to him, "I know who I am as well. That's not the problem. The problem is I don't know where I'm going." He was obviously going off to a lecture and he didn't know when to get off. So the point is, once you know who you are and where you're going, you know what your life's about, then that courage, that spark of courage grows out of that thing, doesn't it? I think in some senses, would you say, Jill, courage is a byproduct of something else. It's not the thing. The thing is, what's my life about? Where am I going? What's my why? And having established that, courage becomes the way you want to live.
Activate it.
It activates it. So the energy doesn't come from trying to be courageous. It comes from trying to get something done, because that's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of my life. And that brings you to life, doesn't it? You are energized by your mission, your purpose, your vision, your sense of vocation or calling in life.
And I think as well, as just picking up on that, I remember being at school and my English teacher being really clear that I was rubbish at writing. Like really clear. Which made me fear writing. But in my work, I do loads of writing.
All the time?
All the time. You know, sometimes what you're having to do is dig deep into that sense of actually what am I, who am I? Am I enough? Am I worthy? And then just whatever has been said to you, or you've thought about yourself, it's just daring to believe that if I just give this a go, and if I give it another go, and I give it another go, and I give it another go, it'll be okay.
Yeah,
it'll be okay.
That's exactly my experience, actually, because I've written about 60-something books. I don't know how many. I've just finished one now, which isn't yet published, but I've written tons of them, over the years. And the first book I wrote was when I was in my 20s, and it was about youth work. And this guy, his name was Dave Roberts, or is Dave Roberts, he asked, he was the editor, the publisher, I mean, and he said, "Why don't you write this book? We need 80,000 words." Well, I was worse at English than you ever were, because you were a teacher. I
just meant I'd scraped the
O-levels.
O-levels.
Seriously. Well, I didn't scrape any O-levels or A-levels or anything. I just failed everything. And I just couldn't write, I'd never written an essay, really, properly, let alone a book. And he said, "Oh, you can do it. And I knew I couldn't, 80,000 words. Anyway, the thing is, he said, "Well, just write it a page at a time." That's a lot of pages, 80,000 words. I thought, a lot of 80,000 words. It's like, anyway, I did. Yeah. And the point was, I realised exactly the point you're making in the end. I cared about youth work. Do you know?
Exactly.
I was a youth worker. I was passionate about giving young people opportunity. And so I didn't even know I knew 80,000 words worth of stuff. I didn't know I knew 800 words worth of stuff. But I just, like, in the end, started with this blank sheet of paper, and I just thought, I don't know how to write a book. I just write what I think, And I wrote what I thought, and it was 80,000 words in the end. And it wasn't even hard. I mean, it took a long time. It's hard in that sense. And they published it. And then they asked me to write another one and another one. And so I realised in the end I could write. But it was driven by this passion which gave me the courage to take it on. That famous quote, you'll know who it's by. It goes something like this: courage doesn't always roar. It's not about roaring. Sometimes courage is just that little voice that at the end of the day says, I'll try again tomorrow. Who was that by, Jill?
Mary Ann Radmacher.
You see, I knew you'd know because you read books as well as write them.
Or I Google.
Well, it's a famous quote, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's so brilliant. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the little voice at the end of the day that says, I'll try again tomorrow, because it's my vision.
Thanks, Steve.